Hello and welcome to another episode of Supercoach Insider. My name is Chris and we're back again with my team part 6. So boys have got a bit of catching up to do. I don't know, I've just been spending a lot of time. Every day there seems to be more information coming out and structures change, players that I'm looking at change, and yeah, it's been a bit all crazy. So this series has also been pretty popular, which is always good. So you guys obviously loving the content. I think this time I've really calmed it down. So I went like full mid-price madness, and I've calmed it down just a touch. I'm still a little bit mid-priced, but I think I've struck the right balance with the team now. I'm probably the happiest I've been with a team. Confident all over the park. And this is probably leaning towards the structure that is probably going to be the most popular structure this year, I think. And it's definitely the one that I'm looking at doing. So we'll hop into it, guys. So, look, I suppose you guys know where I stand with Stuart. I have been looking closely at Sicily and Sinclair. Unfortunately, I just don't have the money, honestly, to be looking at those guys. I know it's only an extra 20k, but taking a haircut at my other lines, every time I look at another guy that I'm putting in there to get that 20k, I actually don't like it. So I've gone with Stuart at D1. Now, at D2, for about 3 or 4 days, I had Dacos right after the Pies Intra Club. I was hot on him. And I don't know if I can do it, though. So, I mean, Dacos 502k. He just looks good, and I'll be so upset if he goes on an absolute heater and ends up being like a 110 averaging player, but I think that's really unlikely. I just have to see it, I guess, and I'll probably suffer and hate myself for it, but we'll have to just see what happens. I mean, look, maybe this changes in the preseason, but at the moment I'm still going with D2 Jordan Dawson, so I've rolled back to those were my first two initially at the start of the preseason. And the more I look at them, they're both slightly undervalued. They've got a little bit of price in them because they both had reasons for. So Stewart obviously had his injury game where he got concussed. Dawson had that start of the year, played a little bit more wing, averaged about 99 over the first 6 rounds. So there's about 4 or 5 points on the bone there on both players per game, which puts them at about that 114, 115 averaging guy, which is what you're expecting from Sicily or Sinclair if they repeat what they did last year. So saving that extra 20 grand, getting these guys in. Dawson's confirmed to be playing across that half-back line, so that shouldn't change his role from last year. And I'm less worried about it because there was a little bit of a report earlier that he might be playing a little bit more wing. That's been thrown out the window. Back on the Dawson train. Doherty's still there. I'm a bit up in the air about it. What we saw last year was that guys that were playing on half-back that moved into the middle didn't necessarily work as well as we'd hoped in regards to scoring, and that could be the same for Doherty. It might not be. I'm not sure, and that question mark for me just has me a little bit worried. The injury to Zach Williams, what does that do to their structure? Is he first to go back? Does that impact his scoring ability? Is the only reason why we're hot on him because he's got midfield time, or is it because we wanted to play back? I actually prefer when he played behind the ball if he was loose. And I've owned him for the last 2 years. So, yeah. So I've gone with the 2 big ones. And then it obviously goes into the cheaper back line. So I do think that from here you got to go value. So Yo is that one. For the first one, I think he's probably going to be the most popular mid-pricer behind Hopper this year. I've gone with Nick Caulfield. So he's now out of the no contact cap, playing in match sim. Role seems to be really, really good. We will watch him in JLT. Sorry, JLT. Wow, how old am I? Sorry, guys. I need a bit of water. I was a bit parched there. If he has the role that he's been playing so far in the intra-clubs, which is that intercepting defender, rebounder off half-back, then, at 200k, you're not going to get much better than that. And he's probably going to hit you around an 80 average. He's basically an elevated rookie price. I would expect somewhere between 70 to 80 from someone around that 200k mark, and that's what I'm hoping he delivers. Jimby still comes in here, guys, at D5 and then, of course, D6. I've actually got a little bit cheaper and I'm locking in Weddle at the moment on field. And that's because there's a variety of other guys that are, say, 123k or below that look like they're going to get early game time. So I think you can run with someone like Weddle at D6 quite easily. Now, this means that I'm not running someone like McKenna, who could burn me. He could go really, really well. I'm just not entirely sold on his job security. There's Wilmot there as well. Do they play both? Do they only play one? Are they juggling one? Is it one poor game for one and then the other one comes in? I don't know yet. So maybe they both make their way into my side at some point. But at this point, I don't need to, so I'm not going to worry about it. On the bench, I'm going to go with Chesser as that first option off the bench. He could be an on-field option. So he's actually been playing Match Sim now. Obviously, they really, really rate him there. It's just a matter of time before he debuts. He will debut early this season. Is that going to be round 1? Is it going to be round 5? I'm not sure. His fitness obviously will determine that. But based on what we're seeing, he's named to play this week. He could burst and just be in the round 1 selection. So I'll play him there. Now, this last spot here is toss-up between two guys who are fighting for the same position for the same team. So we've got Lockie, I think it's Lockie Cowan. Yeah, Lockie Cowan for Carlton. Obviously, with Zach Williams gone down, Doherty staying in the midfield. He played in the A's in the intra-club last week. However, there's also talk that, I want to say Sincotta, I believe, which was the SSP selection for Carlton when Oleg Markov fell through. Sincotta jumped into that spot as an SSP selection. So he's now one thing I do like about Sincotta, or two things I like about Sincotta over Cowan, obviously price point, you save an extra 15k, there's that. But also he's a dual position player already, so he's got that defender mid swing. I was talking to a Blues guy on Twitter. I'm not sure how reliable that source is, of course, but he sort of compared him to a Sard light. So not as obviously as good as Sard or anything like that, but with pace to burn, he's a run and carry type player. And those players generally score pretty well, whereas he referenced Cowan to a potentially like a Liam Stocker type. So a little bit more contested. And so depending on what they're after with their mix, if they're after a Williams-style replacement, you'd probably go with Sincotta as that run and carry type. If they're after someone who they want as a more hard-in-there defensive player who can use the ball quite well, then Cowan is that go. So one of them will get the berth in round 1, and I'm going to make sure that I've got enough cash to go with both so that I'm not left holding the bag if that's the case. But at the moment, I've got Sincotta there. I think he's going to be great. Now, I suppose the biggest change for me so far is my M1. So I've actually moved off of Clary and into Rory Laird. So I've done a lot of research in regards to this. And to me, Laird seems like the better long-term pick. And Clayton seems to be the one that if he's going to drop cash, he's got the potential to. Now, the reason I say that is just pretty much, Clayton's got the ceiling to kill you out of Supercoach. And so I really just hope he doesn't have one of those big, 180, 200 games. But Laird's proven that he's just got that model of consistency last year where he barely dropped below 100. I think his lowest score for the year was 93. And then just continually peppered that 120 mark. Great captain option. There's also a lot to say in regards to how Rory Laird is used. I've got this, been chatting a lot, and there's a couple of theories floating around in regards to Melbourne's way that they're going to shift their midfield, and they're going to rotate more players through there. Now, that's a bit of a red flag. Actually, I'm kind of underselling it. I think that's a big red flag. And the reason why it's a red flag is because Clayton Oliver was the number 1 CBA mid in the entire of the AFL last year. So how I read that is, in order for him to score an average 127, I think it was, he had to be the number 1 mid in the comp in terms of his inside attendances. So if that was to drop for any reason, then his scores are also going to drop. He doesn't have any upside based on his CBA potential. And with them trying to rotate more players through, the next tier of players was Petraka and Jack Viney. They both were at 75%. So I'm anticipating all of these guys to go down maybe 5-6% and allowing these other guys to come through. Guys like Cozzy Pickett, who's been training through that midfield group. So does that mean that Clary goes down to say 82, 80%? What does that do to his scoring? Does that mean that we see a direct correlation or a reduction of his average? Is that down to 120? Is it down to 115? What does that look like? And then how does that impact his price early in the season? So these things are sort of weighing on me a little bit. And I can't afford both, and I'm not going to do both. I think that in my team and my structure, I don't have the money to, and I'm not going to. So I'm going to go with Laird as that safe captain option. He has a lot of... There's also a really great comparison with the guy I'm going to slot in here next, which is the Bont, right? So the VC, I think it was Spiller's Supercoach on Twitter, put out a really great image. And basically what it represented is that you can use Bontempelli or McRae and Laird for 72% of the fixtures up to the bye rounds in terms of a VC and C option. If you have Nick Madden as a rolling lockout. So that's pretty good. It means you're always going to get basically your two best mids into that role. What I'm also going to do into this, and this is probably where I'm changing up my squad again, is I've decided to add Callum Mills into that mixture. Mainly because of his super high ceilings. And I want someone who's going to be able to rival, say, a Clary's absolute maximum ceiling. And for a VC option. So he's going to be my what I call a unique VC. So in chances I've got to play Mills versus an average team or below average team, I feel like that's the best opportunity I can do to just throw a VC on him if I've got the Laird or Bont backup C option. And if he goes absolutely massive, which he's prone to do, he proved we were the 214 last year. The games that he slowed and only went, say, 120, 130, there were games where he was on 100 at half time. And he was pushed back because they had to stop that run of momentum. So there is some negatives with Mills in that, obviously he's a Mr. Fix-It. If they're getting beaten or run over the top of, he goes back into the back line as that extra defender to stop that momentum and to drive it back the other way. Now, sometimes that's good for his scoring, and other times it restricts his scoring because obviously we want to see him around the ball. What I also noticed that he actually had a very low CBA average, though. So he actually only averaged 56% for the year, and he lower in the second half of the year where he sort of trailed off as opposed to the start of the year. So if he can pick that average back up, then he's got another leg to go. So I see the difference between, say, a Clary and a Mills is that Clary's at his absolute maximum peak performance, whereas Mills has opportunity to be able to increase his average tenfold. And in the start of the year, I think he averaged about 125. So take that with a grain of salt because obviously his role and there's downsides, etc. And I understand that. I'm not saying that he's going to be the number one mid this year or anything like that. I just think that he's the sort of player that is still going to average somewhere about 115 minimum, in my opinion, but with the scope to go all the way up to 130. Like if he gets a role as it's Mills midfield and that's it, then fantastic. I do think obviously Warner is going to be still the number one CBA mid like he was last year, but he's also the one that they're probably going to tag. He's the one that is that forward running player that is really, really damaging. So I think that the tag's probably attracted to him. So with Mills, it's all about, is his role good enough? How often does he go behind the ball? In that sort of situation, is Sydney a better side this year or are they a worse side? I mean, they made the grand final last year after having a really great back end. If they're a better side, you'd think that Mills has to rotate behind the ball less, which means he's got bigger impact on the scoreboard. So, on the Supercoach scoring. So I like Mills as a pick. But yeah, he's in there as that VC option. He's going to spike me a real big score on a week where he goes 150 to 200, and I'm taking his VC over, say, whatever Clary did. And that's really how I'm using him during the season. So a little bit cheaper. Obviously saves a bit of coin. But yeah, I think, and I know he probably will drop down to 600 or just below because he's prone to have, that 85 or 90 game. But yeah, that's me for Mills, and that's all I've got to say about it. Coming into M4, of course. I'm going with Tom Green still. He has not left my side, and I don't think he will. There's no chance of that happening. What I have done at this point and this juncture is I've actually removed Tom Mitchell at this stage. So I said in a previous pod that I wasn't locked into the pick, and I'm wanting to see if I can get him here at M5, but I don't want to change that starting four. I think I'm pretty settled on those four guys right now. You know, outside of some guy shooting the moon through the preseason and you just got to get him, this is what my mid four will be. Tom Mitchell could be that next guy because I still like him. I still think his value, but I'm just not completely sold on it right now until I see it. You know, from all reports, he has been playing really well in that midfield there at the Pies. I just can't lock it in. And so for me, it's just a little bit of a wait and see. And yeah, there is a chance, I can move out of a couple other picks and into Tom Mitchell. There's a way around it. It would definitely be a more guns and rookies approach, which could be how I end up. These rookies are starting to turn out. So we'll see how we go. But at the moment, I'm still, chasing the midfield a little bit, mid-price strategy, with combine that with a really big guns approach. So obviously into the next guys, Hopper, again, won't change. He will be that guy for me for the whole year. He'll either be M5 or M6. And of course, I'm still running with Sheed in this spot. So Sheed is one of the guys that could go down. One guy I had there for a couple of days was Cam McKenzie at 180k. And he's now not playing the match tomorrow, I believe. He's not in the squad. So a little bit tentative about that pick. I don't know. There's a wait and see on that on-field mid spot. Whether you can run three there. What I have dabbled with is, say, putting McKenna in the back line, moving Jinby into that mid spot, and then having him at this it would make him M7. That's something that I've actually considered. And then I could use that extra money from Sheed to get in Mitchell, or whatever it may be. Or in other lines. So there's a few different options, but at this stage, I'm pretty comfortable with this. And then, of course, this still hasn't changed. Ashcroft will not change at all, and neither will... obviously, I watched the North Intra Club. Two things I'll say about the North Intra Club. One, they're still North. And I was pretty unimpressed with the level of play. I know it's a preseason game, but the North A side were battling basically half a VFL team in the first quarter. Griffin Logue basically dominated their forwards, and I was just unimpressed most of the game. Cunnington went forward and looked like an AFL superstar full forward. No one was on him. It was a real strange matchup. And then there was just guys loose all over the place. LDU looked a little bit behind it. People said LDU looked great. I was like, really? I was pretty worried. It didn't look like he was fantastic. Cunnington did that against a weak side, but he looked all right. He was probably one of the only real highlights. Sheasel, they were like, oh my gosh, he went behind the ball and looked great. He looked terrible. I don't know what they were looking at, but he turned the ball over multiple times, made really bad decisions on his exit kicks, was poorly positioned. I think he knows how to find the pill, but anyone loose at half back knows how to find the pill. All you got to do is get in line with the football and go, oh, wow, there's the ball. It's coming straight to me. It's really, it's not hard to do. I didn't like him at half back. When he moved into the forward line, though, he was fantastic. I'm just not sure that he's a guy that I want in my team at that price. Now, moving on to the bench quickly. So Oscar Baker, he's firming for a round one debut on that wing. And I think if he plays that wing, you can't not have him. And I've gone with Charlie Constable here. So this is a mid-defender swing. And this is going to enable me a little bit of flexibility. So you can move back Jinby or you can move back Chesser with Constable, etc. And it's going to allow me a little bit of flexibility as I move throughout the season. And the same reason I'm looking at Drury. So Drury did look all right. He played in the B team to start with. And then he switched to the A team in the second half. So I think he's on the cusp of selection, but I don't think he's necessarily best 22. We'll have to wait and see how these next two preseason games go. But he looked all right with the ball, and he used it very well, and that's what I was impressed with. He attacks the ball at half back. He's not one that just sit back and behind, and he runs, and he gets those 1-2s. I think Ben compared him to a Caleb Daniel type, and that's a very good analogy as how I would see him. And by all reports, he's had a fantastic preseason and shot through to round 1 selection possibility. So I more like him in this spot because I want a mid forward as a flexible option. And I've kind of gone off, I think it's Johnson, is it? That's from Freo? Yeah, Matty Johnson. He seems to be playing in the B mids in all their intra-clubs so far. And I'm not sure that he's one to get a round 1 berth at this stage. Now, having said that, if he provides a couple of good games and is in that mix, then I'll put him in. Like, I think you can't not start him. And he scores well, of course. But yeah, at this stage, I'm going with Drury in that spot for that flexibility. Other guys I'm looking at, obviously, Josh Sin, if he becomes available, and that all. But I'm not sure. I don't think he plays round 1. Joe Richards, there is a small forward spot available, obviously, for the first 2 games at least, with Ginnivan going down. Maybe he gets that gig. I think that's Bobby Hills to lose at this stage, but we'll see how we go there. So those are what I've gone there. Ruck. So this has changed. So I've ended up just biting the bullet with English as my R1. And look, at the end of the day, there's a couple of reasons for this, but the biggest one is obviously Darcy Cameron's had a little bit of a setback, but he is back in training now. He's running around and getting into the swing of things. I'm not sure if he's in the squads. I don't think they've announced the Pies squads yet, but I'm pretty sure he will play this week. If not, he'll play next week. My thing is Mason Cox looks fantastic. He's clunking marks all over the place, and I know that he was playing against a rookie ruck, 2 rookie rucks, of course. But he was back, he was forward, he was wing. He's taken huge grabs everywhere, all over the park. And that aerial presence that's come ever since his glasses, he was able to wear those prescription glasses because he had that injury to his eyes. He's really turned into quite a presence around the field. And I'm not sure that means that they're going to not run Cox if he's healthy. And initially, I was actually of the opinion that, Cox is done. They're going to run McStay as that second forward. That way they can run McStay, Ash Johnson, and Myercheck. But having seen his performance in that intra-club, I now am moving towards, I think it is Cox and Cameron. And I think it is, Cox, Cameron, McStay, and Myercheck, and Johnson's the one on the outer, unless he can push out Myercheck, which is essentially who is battling now for that other forward spot. Now, obviously, Darcy Cameron doesn't average as well with Cox in the team, and I'm not sure if that's related to ruck time or if it's just matchups, what that is. I've tried to look at that statistically on a few different facts. At the end of the day, last year, Cameron only averaged, I think, 56% ruck time anyway for his average. Once he went into the ruck full time, which was after round 6, I think it was. So round 7 onwards, he averaged 56%, and averaged 97 points per game from that. So some of that wasn't with Cox in the team though. So you've got to take that with a grain of salt. Like where is the statistical anomaly? And honestly, I think it's more of a wait and see. And I don't think he's going to price you out. So he could be a forward that you bring in if he's going really well, or if Cox is dropped, you could look to bring him in. I could still start him for round 1. I'm not sure, but at this point, I'm not going for the Darcy Cameron train. It's the first time I'm actually out of it. So I would suggest that this is probably the most popular ruck line currently, and I would be surprised if people don't go in with English and Marshall. Obviously, Witts is another popular selection, but it's a little bit more expensive. English has the risk of the soft tissues, right? But part of starting him is that risk factor of I don't want to have to bring him in. Like if in round 3 he's averaging 140 and just goes ham in those first 2 rounds, and I'm forced to grab him and I've got to change around my side to get him, and then he gets injured in round 5, what am I going to do? Not happy. Whereas if I play him from round 1, he gets injured in round 5 or whatever, take that, he's made a little bit of money, and then you can trade to whichever other ruck looks like they're going to be the number 1 ruck for the season. So that's the plan at this stage, and until further notice, I'm on the English Marshall train. All right, moving into the forward. So this has changed slightly. Like before I went with the 4 big forwards, I've slightly downgraded that to the 3 forwards. So I've gone with Dunkley. Canelio hasn't changed, and I don't think those 2 will change. And I've actually, instead of Taranto, I'm locking in Rosie at this point. So I'm foregoing the Taranto because the upside for Rosie seems to be higher. And That's the only reason. So I think that Rosie potentially has the opportunity to go, say, 110 plus, and I'm not entirely sold on the fact that Taranto will. So there's a little bit to play out there, but I just see Taranto as that guy that gets 30. He can still get 35 possessions and only get you 100 Supercoach, and that's an issue for me. Whereas if Rosie has 35, he's gone 150. Big difference. The ceiling there for Rosie is what's going to get me across the line, and I know that he's probably got a bit a worse floor, but yeah, I'm going with Rosie at this point. Now, until further notice, I'm going with Jack Zeeble at F4. Now, that's obviously one of the ways I was able to save a bit of coin is training at Taranto, getting Zeeble into that pick. That's one way. Zeebel's role was there during the intra-club, but he didn't perform very well. So he's playing half-back, ready for the switch. I don't think I saw North Melbourne switch the ball once. Now, is that a symptom of how Clarko wants to play moving forward? Or were they just 10 goals up because he's playing on the A team? They were absolutely smashing the other team. Ball didn't go down there very much. Didn't see the need to switch. There wasn't like a team plan or team goal to do it. I saw Buckets turn the ball over about 5-6 times and made bad decisions when you've got Zeeble 20 metres away ready for a switch on his own, just sitting there. So I don't know if that's necessarily reflective of how they're going to be using the ball coming out of defence. So I need to watch more. I need to see the next couple of preseason games. He did take some kickouts, but the other team didn't score very much. And there was a period there in the first quarter where he was off the field and Luke McDonald took 2 or 3 kickouts in a row. And I don't know why he was off the field in the first quarter. Like he was off for, I think, 10 or 15 minutes of the first quarter after the first 10 minutes. So I'm not sure why that was, but obviously, Zeeble is the one that he did take a couple of kickouts. Who else took a kickout? I'm not sure, but I know McDonald was one of the other candidates. Hall's had awareness, so Aaron Hall may not even play round 1, and like if he gets up, he's a walking time bomb. So there goes another user out of that back line. He's got hamstring awareness, and again, he's got constant hamstring issues. So the club have said, look, we're gonna be conservative with him. He's probably not going to play the preseason games. Like they're going to roll him into round 1 with an interrupted preseason, bung hammies, and he's one. As I said, he's 1 quarter away from absolutely missing the next 4 to 8 weeks. Not ideal, and I'm not interested in an Aaron Hall pick at all. And anyone that tries to pick him, just talk them out of it or leave them to their own devices. But if Aaron Hall's not playing, there's another avenue for more scoring from Zeeble. Who do they use in that spot? Does that open the doorway for someone like a Goda? Is that Drury that comes into that spot? I saw Lewis Young was actually pretty good. I think it's Lewis Young, or is it Lockie Young? Young, one of the Young. There's 2 Youngs. He actually performed pretty well. I was actually quite impressed with his performance. Logue was fantastic though. He started in the Bs and went to the As, and I look forward to that back 6 gelling. They're going to get pumped though. North looks they're below par. They're going to get absolutely pumped. And then so F5 and F6. So I've gone McLean obviously here. So he's moved a little bit shallower. So I did have him in F6. Now I've moved him to F5. And the bolter for me has been Philippou. So it looks like he's going to get a round 1 start. There's been a lot of talk about him. Obviously, they've got huge issues up forward. So many injuries. They've got 4 first-team players right now in the forward line injured, with question marks over their round 1 availability. And all the talk out of St Kilda has been, he's like, I think the GM or one of the coaches said, he's all but locked in for round 1 based on what they've seen in the preseason. And then who was it? The Phantom posted some stats of his Supercoach scoring abilities in the TAC Cup, and I think one of them was like 261, something stupid. Like he's got a stupidly high ceiling, likened to the Bont. Now he'll probably play forward, but if he gets some mid pinch hits in mid time or whatever, it could go well for his scoring. If he's that good, he could score well even as a forward, and so I think he might be an on-field option for us. So one that I'm looking to probably play on field. I think if you're going to spend 166k on someone, they have to be an on-field option. If they don't look to be on field, I'm not interested at that price. So on the bench, though, there is some good options that have come through in the forward line. First one's Fergus Green. So he looks to have locked up a round one spot at this stage with the injuries they've got down there at the Hawks in the forward line, plus with Gunston going. So there's definitely available round one spot. I think he's going to be one to take it. And then Comben looked fantastic. Now, what's interesting about Comben is that I think he's basically guaranteed best 22 now. I think he is a rock-solid option in that forward line. But he also did do a bit of chop out of ruck. So depending on how they set that up, Goldstein rucked in the B team. Is he part of the A squad? Are they running Cherry and Goldstein? Or is it running Goldstein and no Cherry? Are they running Cherry and no Goldstein? And if that's the case, is Comben getting some ruck chop outs? Because that would even be a little bit better in terms of his on-field scoring ability. So I like those two as for rookies. The other one that I like, still like Constantine from Sydney. He looks to be having a round one berth as well. However, small forwards, is that going to... small forwards versus key forwards, I'm not sure which is the better selection. Who knows at this stage. Ultimately, those forward rookies on the bench will be the best performing rookies from this preseason. But there you have it, guys. The team coming into the preseason watch. This is the team that I'm probably most satisfied with so far this preseason. It's got balance all over the park, opportunities for development throughout the season. The right amount of mid-prices, so I've got a mid-pricer in the defence and in the forward line, and then two in the midfield, so you've got a little bit of flexibility there to be able to chop and change if you need be. The rookies look to be the right rookies, but again, that'll come to fruition during the preseason, and I love all the premiums. I'm sold on all the premiums so far, so hope you liked it, guys. I look forward to talking to you guys and about your teams. Hit us up with some questions in the comments. How's your team going? What are you struggling with? And I'll try and give you a hand. But that's me out, guys. Have a good one. Cheers.